Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Jake Ziegler, and I'm here with Brad Garoon. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. Today, we're covering the year 1948 with a couple of movies I am excited to talk about. How about we start with The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, the one I picked for you?
Yeah, first off, great intro, dude. You sounded perfect.
Thanks.
Tell me, why did you choose the Treasure of this? I can tell you why we're doing Treasure of the Sierra Madre now, but first, why don't you tell me why you chose it for me?
Well, I had a sneaking suspicion. It had been a while since I'd seen this movie, but I remember studying it in one of my college classes, and I'd seen it a couple of times, but it had been a while. But I had a sneaking suspicion that this might be one of the best movies ever made. And then when I rewatched it, I had that suspicion to myself, at least, confirmed, and I was fairly certain that this was a movie that you were going to like. And at any rate, it was also a very famous movie from the era, and it just, for a number of reasons, seemed like a good one to discuss. And also, again, when I rewatched it, I just really, really liked it a lot. And I think it's just phenomenal in every aspect.
I agree with you. So I watched it because I watch Humphrey Bogart movies with my father-in-law.
Mm.
He was in town. He has been asking me a lot, have you ever seen Treasure of the Sierra Madre? Obviously, I haven't because we're doing it on this podcast. He put it on, and I'd forgotten that it was on the list. Once it was over, and after I loved it, I wrote to you. I looked on the list and I was like, hey, we need to do 1948 before I forget what I saw in this movie.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you recommended it for me. It's terrific. I did not know that Bogart ever played. He's not a villain per se, but he is the de facto villain of this movie.
He's definitely not a hero.
He's a bad, bad man.
Yeah.
I thought the way that the themes of the movie circled back, first up, usually in movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s, sometimes the morals are very heavy handed. I thought that this was handled so delicately with conversations in the background and things overheard and declarations of things that I'll never be. I'll never let gold get the best of me. Before you realize that the movie's about gold. Really, really well done. So Bogart's terrific. Who directed this?
John Huston.
Of course. Who's also in it?
Walter
Yes.
Huston is in
Uh,
it.
Absolutely, John Huston is in it. In the beginning of the movie, Bogart is homeless and he's panhandling all the time, and he asks the same guy 3 times for money,
Oh,
and
right,
that
right,
is
right,
John
right.
Huston.
Yeah.
Walter Huston, of course, is a main character in the movie, and he
Yeah.
is the greatest person alive.
One of the best performances I like. If I'm making a top 10, he's probably going to be on it.
I would say that the prospector character from Toy Story 2 is based on this, except Kelsey Grammer is no Walter Houston, and Walter Houston is much more like the Gee Willikers, let's go get that goal. It's so much fun, but he's so smart for someone who's playing, and he's not playing it dumb either. He's not trying to outwit anyone.
Mhm.
He's just who he is all the time, but people assume that he doesn't really know what's going on because of how he sounds. But at no point does he let on that he's dumb. He's giving people advice the entire time, and it's always right. He's basically omniscient.
Yeah, he's really the smartest person in the movie by far. And the way he kind of handles the Humphrey Bogart character, I think he kind of knows that, like, okay, this is gonna go south. This guy is not in it for the long haul. He goes, but he kind of tries to handle it as best he can for as long as he can. Just kind of work with it. Like, I remember there's the one scene where they decide, like, okay, we're gonna have to what are we gonna do with our take? Are we gonna divide it up at the end, or are we gonna divide it up every night? And you can tell that when once Humphrey Bogart, once he suggested, well, we're going to have to do it every single night, and Walter Houston just like, yeah, okay, let's do that. He just agrees with him right away because he knows, like, there's no way that this conversation is going to end up any other way with this guy. So that's just another example of him, like, just being the kind of the smartest guy in the room, where, like, he knows there's just that this is the way it's got to be.
Right. He turns out to be a little bit of a Ricky Stenicki type, though, and I think that's going to be what we call Manic Pixie Dream Girl from now on.
Yeah.
Um, he's a bit of a Ricky Stenicki in that he can do anything.
Yes.
Why don't we say what the movie's about? We got a little excited because it's so good.
Yes.
Humphrey Bogart and Tim Holt, who play the characters Frank Dobbs and Bob Curtin, are two really down on their luck Americans living in Mexico for some reason. I didn't understand why. Maybe just because they thought it would be cheaper to live there. And they take odd jobs here and there, but they're really, really stupid. So they're constantly getting ripped off. And even when they're able to beat someone up to get their money back, they're no better off than they were before. And just by luck, they're in a homeless shelter and they overhear Walter Houston, who plays Howard the prospector, talk about gold being in them their hills. And And now Howard is talking about how every time he gets a little gold, it gets taken away from him or something terrible happens. And gold is absolutely cursed. And there's no reason to be a prospector, even though that's his profession. And after getting screwed out of doing some construction work or oil rig, real like hard manual labor, they decide they want to do prospecting, but they don't have the money to prospect. But wouldn't luck have it that Humphrey Bogart's character wins the lottery, which is so funny. Do you know who the actor is who plays the little kid at the beginning of that movie?
No, who is it?
It's Robert Blake.
Shut up.
It's Robert Blake, like Lost Highway, killed his wife, Robert Blake.
Wow. I did
Yeah,
not know that. Wow.
crazy. So Robert Blake in brownface helps Humphrey Bogart win the lottery. And so then they eventually go and recruit the prospector, Howard, mine for gold.
Right, because they need his knowledge and he needs their brawn, basically,
Right.
because he's a little older, but he can climb a mountain like a goat.
He's in way better shape than them, it turns out, because he's Ricky Stenicki.
Yeah.
But he does need them because it's a lot. It's a lot to do. It's a ton of work. They have to set up a mine. On their way there, they're beset by bandits. And I think the funniest scene in the whole movie. So they're on the train on their way to the mountain. Bandits attack. Luckily, the prospectors and a few other people. There's some soldiers on the train. It turns out, you find out. A conductor tells them. So they scare off the bandits, and the conductor comes in and says, "There were some soldiers on the train, so only a couple of people died."
Yeah.
And he says it so casually. What is this movie?
That's 1920s America, man.
So they get to the mountain, and yeah, the most of the movie is not a thriller. It's pretty light. It's a light drama about, are they going to keep the gold? Are they first off, are they going to find gold? They find it pretty quickly. Like you mentioned, there's tension around who's keeping the gold where and when, and will anyone come looking for them as they're prospecting gold? And of course, because it's a movie, people do. You had compared this to another movie the other day. What was that?
Simple Plan.
Yes. Yes. Very similar to A Simple Plan in that there's
Three
three.
men,
Yep.
coming into a big fortune out in, out in a wilderness or, different barren type areas, coming into a lot of money together, trying to figure out how to deal with it and what to do with it. I've found a lot of parallels to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of glad we ended up watching them close together, because I don't know if I would have put it together if we had watched them like, a year or two apart or whatever.
I'll tell you what, we watched them close together. I didn't put it together.
Oh.
So no, but even the like one of them smart and two of them are stupid. And in both cases, it's not the one and the two that you think.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, you kind of got the leading man. You kind of think Humphrey Bogart, he's the movie star of the tree. And you kind of have, maybe some people have that impression that like he'd be the one because, he's he's a movie star, but he's not. He's definitely one of the dumb ones.
Yeah. So the two things that end up interfering are, first, an actual real like good at his job prospector shows up, and they all have very different ideas of how to deal with him at first. Bogart, of course, wants to just like kill him immediately. Howard thinks they can schmooze him and get him to go away. And Tim Holtz, Bob Curtin, thinks they can lie to him and get him to leave. Turns out in the end, they all decide we've got to kill this guy. And they go to talk to him, and he turns out to actually be the smartest of all of them. But none of it matters because bandits show up again. And we are given the most famous line, one of the most misquoted lines in movie history, but also one of the most famous: "Badges, we don't need to show you no stinking badges."
Yep.
Which I laughed my ass off when he said it. And that's Alfonso Bedoya playing El Jefe in a great, he's called El Jefe. I think in the movie, he's actually called like the gold sombrero or something like that.
Gold sombrero. Yeah.
He's amazing. And he has no idea what he's looking for. My favorite part of the movie is the bandits have no idea what they want from these guys.
No, they're just whatever it is that they have. I mean, they're not specifically looking for the gold or anything like that. They're just out there, just out there banditing.
Yep, and that of course majorly disrupts everything. Luckily, you know what? I think we shouldn't spoil any of the rest. Not because it's such an old movie, and it's not like the surprises in the movie are so shocking. They're all kind of obvious once they happen.
Of course, yeah.
But feeling them as they happen is much more interesting. So I don't want to say what the fate of any of our characters, even the Bruce Bennett character, who, the fourth guy who shows up later. I just loved it. And I'm not sure, but it's one of only 3 John Hurt movies I've seen. He did The Maltese Falcon with Bogart.
John Huston.
Also. Oh, I always do that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is a lot of the same letters.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of the, John Huston, the man who had the most perfect voice in the history of the world. He did The Maltese Falcon, which was amazing with Bogart. He also did Annie, which was less amazing.
Yeah.
but is Jake's favorite word iconic.
Yes, yes, it is.
And then a lot of people know John Huston as being the villain of Chinatown, or if you're me, the voice of Gandalf in the original Lord of the Rings movie or the original Hobbit cartoon. I just think he's great, and I love that he put his dad in this movie. Have you seen a lot of John Huston movies?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few. I've seen, Maltese Falcon, Key Largo is another John Huston movie, and I've also seen Casino Royale,
Yep,
and then in the '80s he directed a film called Prizzi's Honor with Jack Nicholson and Angelica Houston that I've seen that I also really liked.
he's great. And then
Yeah, he is.
Bogart. And this is only the third Bogart movie I've seen. I've seen this Casablanca and Maltese Falcon. I only see them when Ken tells me that we should watch one. But I think we've got a couple more on the list.
I think so. Yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, it's very psychological. The battles between the three, that the three of them are having. It's. I really can't recommend this movie enough.
It has given all the tumult, it has a shockingly satisfying ending.
Yeah, it's like a perfect movie.
So let's talk about another movie that is so highly regarded from 1948. That is the British export, the Archers film, Powell and Pressburger, The Red Shoes. So I
Yeah, tell me
decided
why you picked this one for me.
it's just so famous. So I hadn't seen it, but I've seen people talking about it. It's so psychological and it's so fantastic and so psychedelic and wild. And there's this dream ballet that's incredible. And Prowl and Pressburger, of course, are amazing. And we loved Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, and I liked it. I wound up liking this a lot. So this movie is quite a bit different. It is about a ballet and how a sort of like strict, tyrannical producer brings along, and he's, I believe, meant to be Russian. I think most of the cast is meant to be Russian. It's
His name is
ballet,
Boris, so I
right?
mean, I think that's the implication.
Right, and then ballet is notoriously a Russian endeavor. The prima ballerina in the Moscow Ballet.
Yeah.
Uh, and then what is it? Oh, it's from Batman. Right. I was like, what is that from? It's Batman.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
And then he brings with him and brings into his world a conductor, an upstart conductor named Craster, played by Marius Goring, and a very promising but green dancer named Victoria Page, played by Moira Shearer in her debut performance. She was a legit ballerina.
Would have to be, yeah.
100%. I mean, I'm watching this and I'm like, how did they do Black Swan? Because there's no way that a real actress could have done what Moira Shearer's doing in this movie.
Right.
She's incredible as a dancer. I have some things to say about her as an actress, but absolutely incredible as a dancer. And Craster was really good as like a spunky, wants to be the best, but keeps getting kind of screwed conductor. So there are these two British people that Boris Lermontov, and they always call him by his full name, Boris Lermontov, Boris
Yeah.
Lermontov.
Or by his last name, but very few people ever could just call him no one calls him Boris.
Never. But a lot of them say their first name and last name, like Grisha Lubov. Grisha
Yeah.
Lubov is here. Yeah, he brings these two, and the two of them, and then the crux of the story is the two British people fall in love with each other, and Boris is furious because it disrupts all his plans, and he may be in love with Katie Page.
Which is very secondary, though, to his love of the ballet, his troupe, or whatever it is. If he is in love with her, yeah, that's very secondary.
Right. I mean, so you're 100% correct. Earlier in the movie, his prima ballerina falls in love, decides to get married, and he fires her. Not because he was in love with her, but because she will now not be focused on ballet. And so, but it does seem like he's starting to fall for Vicky when it is revealed to him that she is seeing Craster. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What did you think of the Red Shoes?
I thought it was really cool. I didn't know it was directed by the same guys who did Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. I feel like I should have known that, but once I found that out after Red Shoes, I was like, this makes so much sense. This the way it was told and the way it was directed. I felt like they were similar, and I mean that in a very good way. Liked this movie a lot. I thought all three of the main performances were mostly pretty good. I mean, I think you could tell Moira Shearer it was new, but again, having someone to carry the dancing scenes like that, I mean, you needed someone like that. But yeah, I thought both Boris, the actors playing Boris and Craster, were very good. The sequence in the middle, I mean, the big ballet dream sequence that you've heard about a million times, of course, is pretty extraordinary. What they do with it and just how it looks and everything. It's really quite exquisite, and the Technicolor looks amazing. The restoration that they did on it, I think, looks like this does not look like a movie from 1948. I mean, it looks outstanding.
I think Wizard of Oz aside, this might be the most Technicolor movie that's ever existed. Not now that's look, Technicolor is a technique. It's not like an amount of
Right.
color in the movie. But
Right.
this is it is so vibrant. What I love about Technicolor is the way it makes people look. Because you can
Yes.
so spot it. Like white people look like a very specific shade of tan, and because they're all old movies, it's mostly white people in these movies.
Right.
Incredible looking. And yes, the Dream Ballet is it goes, I think it's a 17-minute sequence. If you like Singing in the Rain or An American in Paris or really any Gene Kelly musical, you're going to get like a 20-minute dance number in it, and this will fill that quota. Absolutely. It does it in a much more Soviet feeling way, which is very cool because this is a Russian ballet that's touring Europe. The shot where the cobbler is standing in silhouette, and then all of a sudden it's Boris, and then all of a sudden it's Craster, and that
Yeah.
sums up like what are the things pulling her in each different direction. And she runs to it because what does she want? Something, but she hasn't
Both of them.
decided what yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this was great too. I didn't like it as much as I liked Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, but I will say I liked it enough that I went into our list and took out one of the movies that I recommended for you and put a different Powell and Pressburger movie in
Oh
so that
wow.
we could watch that instead. It was a Groucho Marx movie called A Night in Casablanca. It's fine. I put it there because I'd seen it. I don't think we have to cover the Marx Brothers in Never Did It. Maybe we'll get to it, but I'd much rather watch A Matter of Life and Death because I want to watch another Powell and Pressburger Technicolor movie.
Sure.
But
Sounds
yeah,
good.
one thing that I think held this back for me was you mentioned like, okay, maybe the Boris character wasn't in love with Vicky, but I almost don't buy that Vicky was in love with Craster because that felt a little
Interesting.
underbaked.
Yeah.
You didn't get to it till like far past the middle of the movie that they had a real relationship going. It's like they
Right.
meet once, they talk on a balcony, it's not romantic, and then all of a sudden they're in love with each other. So that's fine, given depending on the ending of the movie. I've read an interpretation, and spoiler alert for the end of this movie. I've read an interpretation that the shoes may have possessed Vicky and made her jump off the roof to her death after she has that impossible time deciding between Craster and Boris.
Yep.
And I don't know, it just like maybe I should need to watch it again. It just didn't sit right with me. It felt forced so that they could have this tragic, intense ending where Boris gets to give this big broken speech, which was very good.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then for her to be alive just long enough for her to tell Craster to take off the shoes. Maybe it's probably just I didn't understand it, but but I didn't understand it. So it was a little lost on me. What did you think of the ending?
Well, I thought I saw that interpretation as well, and that's kind of what I how I thought the movie was going. Just because it's a ballet, it's going to have a big dramatic ending. I think that's kind of the way it goes with ballet. So I was kind of what I was expecting to come from it. So I was okay with that ending, having it be a big melodramatic sequence like that, because that's kind of what I was expecting it to be.
Did you like the romance between Craster and Victoria?
It worked enough for me. I felt like that between the balcony sequence and then when they were falling, I felt like there was time passing. Like they indicated that some time had passed in which there was time enough for them to build up a romance to serve the story adequately enough for what they were doing. I always felt like the ballet was the much stronger aspect of the story, versus the romantic part of the story. And the romance could have been stronger, I think, but I think it worked well enough to balance, be a balance against the ballet. But I mean, if the ballet was definitely the stronger aspect and the stronger force, I think, in the movie for me.
Yeah. Again, Adolf Walbrook, so good in this. So good in Life and Death. I'm always gonna say Life and Times.
Yeah.
Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. So good in this. When I was on a work trip a few years ago, I started watching this movie called Lola Montez, which I watched because Peter Ustinov is one of the lead roles. And now I'm seeing that, and I never finished it. Now I'm seeing that Walbrook was in it too. So I absolutely have to go back and
You
finish
got to
it.
go back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on Max and it's on Criterion, but I've got to go back. I mean, you know what? It's time for me to get moving on my Peter Ustinov, my big Peter Ustinov
You're
project.
done with
Although
Walter Matthau. Now you got it. Yeah.
I'll never finish it because Ustinov's movies are so much harder to track down. For one
Yeah.
thing, he was British. He wasn't American. So some of these movies, and he did a lot of. He spoke German and Italian. So a lot, or maybe he didn't speak Italian, but he was in a lot of Italian movies. But I'm not able to find them. And when I am, I'm not able to find them with subtitles because they weren't
Yeah.
released on American
Right.
DVD. Maybe I'll just do what I can.
Yeah. Find like what's available. Yeah.
Yeah, like Lola Montez. Lola Montez. I don't know. I don't know how these accent marks work. Anywho,
Anywho.
any more on the Red Shoes?
No, I mean, I felt even with the running time, I felt like it moved along pretty well. I mean, having that, it's like 2 hours and 20 minutes, but again, almost 20 minutes of that is this one dance sequence that's just amazing. So very highly recommended. I know Scorsese thinks really highly of it. I just saw a TikTok, him and is it his daughter or his granddaughter? He does the
That's
TikToks with.
so funny that you asked that. It's his daughter.
It is his daughter. I can never remember, but my wife shows them to me, and they just had talked. They had just mentioned it on the TikTok that they had done, and then I ended up watching the movie the other day. But yeah, it's a really cool movie, and yeah, Powell and Pressburger, if you're into that at all, I liked it less than Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, but it's pretty close. I mean, I think they're both really really excellent.
It's funny you mentioned the length. It is 30 minutes shorter than Colonel Blimp.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. But there are other movies that are even shorter than that. So I'm excited to get to A Matter of Life and Death. I'm really excited.
Yeah,
Oh, no, real quick. Any
top
Oscar love?
fives. Oh,
What?
oh, Oscar love. Yeah, yeah. Actually, both of these movies did really well. Let me Let me get my notes. But yeah, both of these movies did really well. We'll start with The Red Shoes. These were actually both these were Best Picture nominees. All right, The Red Shoes was nominated for 5 Oscars, including Best Picture, and it was also nominated for Best Motion Picture Story, which is a category that's not really in use anymore. It was actually kind of given out for the best film treatment. Basically, they used to give awards for like a treatment as well, because it was as part of the studio system, that was something that was just a little bit more common. Like scripts would just get developed differently, and it was less about individual writers at that time, and then things got a little bit different.
So what
uh
does that mean? Like it's about I don't I'm
well,
not pretend I know nothing, which he in this case I
sure,
do.
which was me until like 2 days ago when I was looking this up to looking these up to do the podcast. So what Wikipedia says, I'm just right, going right from the wiki page, which actually literally says this award can be a source of confusion for modern audiences, given its coexistence with the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay and Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. The Oscar for Best Story most closely resembles the usage of modern film treatments or prose documents that describe the entire plot and characters but typically lack most dialogue. A separate screenwriter would convert the story into a full screenplay. Now, as an example, at the 1944 Academy Awards, producer and director Leo McCarey won Best Story for Going My Way, while screenwriters Frank Butler and Frank Cavett won Best Screenplay. The elimination of this category in 1956 reflects the decline of Hollywood's studio system and the emergence of independent screenwriters. So, like, I guess the one that The Red Shoes was up for, this Best Motion Picture Story, would be like the people who come up with the story, like, I guess, like the treatment or the outline. Here's what happens, and then they would hand it off to somebody else to write the screenplay. And that was part of like the assembly line studio system that kind of went away, I guess, in the late 50s and into the 60s, when more screenwriters, were just getting independent screenwriters.
I understand. It'd be like best elevator pitch now.
Basically, yeah, that would
Yeah.
be kind of what it is now, which they definitely would not give an award for at this point.
Although, don't put it past them.
Right.
Hollywood producers giving themselves awards.
Anything before stuntmen.
Any That's
Yeah.
hilarious. All right, go
But
on.
yes, and the others, it was also nominated for Best Film Editing, and then the 2 awards that it won were Best Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedy Picture and Best Art Direction, Set Decoration, Color, because they had the color and black and white awards back then. So those were the 2 that it won. So it went 2 for 5. That's pretty good. And then Treasure of the Sierra Madre actually did a little better. It was also nominated for Best Picture. It was nominated for and won Best Director for John Huston. It also won Best Supporting Actor for Walter Huston. And then this one won the Best Screenplay award, which at this time was what they called Best Adapted Screenplay, because this was adapted from a book.
What were they calling the best original screenplay?
This year they didn't have an original screenplay award.
Nothing was original back then.
Yeah, I guess not. I think, but they had it in other years, like around that. I think it was kind of, it would vary year to year. Because like I'm looking at the year before, yeah, they did have best original screenplay the year before.
So I don't have a top 10 for 1948, but you have a top 5.
I do have a top 5, and I will mention too, just because both of these movies were Best Picture nominees, what they lost to is a movie I haven't seen, but it's the Laurence Olivier version of Hamlet was the Best
Yeah.
Picture that year, which in itself was was the first non-American film to win the Best Picture award, which I think is kind of neat. And
Apropos of that,
Yeah.
We just heard that Honora won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. And even though it is the fifth in a row Neon distributed film to win, it is the first American film to win in like 13 years.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah. And my neighbor was the prop master on it. So I just
All right,
texted her to wish her congratulations.
that is cool.
Yeah,
Good for Sean Baker. I mean, he's awesome.
absolutely.
Yep.
And congratulations, Iman Nader.
But yes, I do have a top five of 1948. You said you do not have a top five.
These are the only two 1948 movies I've seen.
Well, how would you rank them?
I would call Treasure of the Sierra Madre one of the most fun movies I've ever seen, and I would say The Red Shoes is also fun.
Okay. All right. Well, if I'm doing my top five, my number five would be a movie that I really like, but I don't have a rating for just because I haven't seen it in a long time. The aforementioned Key Largo. My number four would be a movie that's a great deal of fun. It's Bud Abbott, Lou Costello meet Frankenstein. It's an Abbott and Costello movie where they meet Dracula, Frankenstein monster, and the Wolfman, and hijinks ensues.
Do they meet Frankenstein?
They meet the Frankenstein monster.
But do they meet Frankenstein?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. I know it's mostly about the monsters.
Okay.
But it's pretty funny if you like, Abbott and Costello. My number three movie for that year is a movie called The Lady from Shanghai. It's an Orson Welles movie. It's kind of like a romantic triangle movie. I originally had this picked for us for 1947, but then I realized it came out in the States in 48. So we may or may not end up getting to that movie, but it's really good. It's a very good Orson Welles movie. And then my number two is The Red Shoes, and then number one is Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Okay, so I lied. I actually have seen two other movies this year. I like your list.
Thank you.
I have also seen and on this podcast talked about Melody Time. That's one of the Disney animated films that came out during or in the post World War II era, which means it's not one movie, it's two or several. This one I can't remember everything that's on it, but I know it has Johnny Appleseed, the most religious thing that Disney ever released, and then Bicycle Thieves or The Bicycle Thief, depending
How have
on.
I never seen that? That's embarrassing.
So I don't feel too bad. I saw it for the first time in 2020. It's very good.
So if I had to rank them, it would go Melody, and Melody Time doesn't really count because whatever. I would do Red Juice 3, Bicycle Thieves 2, Treasure of the Sierra Madre number 1.